Welcome to this week's show, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it is a sad day here in the Linton household. Denise's mom, my mother-in-law, passed away in the early morning hours yesterday. I want to thank you all for your prayers these past few weeks. Joanne passed away in her sleep, peacefully, with her daughter Sherry and son-in-law Mark at her side. Her passing came right on the heels of my tribe's return from our replanned getaway. Denise, Kaylee, Eric, and I returned from the West Coast on a red-eye flight Saturday. Needless to say, we have had an emotional roller coaster weekend. I would like to ask that you continue to lift Denise and the rest of her family up in your prayers as they handle the loss of their mother. As I promised you the past couple of weeks, today's episode brings to you one of Tennessee's best defenders of liberty in the General Assembly, State Senator Janice Bowling. She's one of those rare legislators that work in the Capitol to not have government do something for you. Senator Bowling works to keep our government from doing something to you. She believes in keeping government, whether it is at the state or the federal level, but she believes in keeping government in its proper, constitutionally limited role in the people's lives. She's a great patriot, and we are truly blessed and humbled to have her on the program this week. This conversation, though, was recorded a couple of weeks ago, and I saved it to cap off the Veterans Day weekend. I did that for a reason. I believe that I have spoke before on this topic about how I respond when somebody, especially on Veterans Day, thanks me for my service. My usual response is that I thank them for their support. But do you really want to know how to thank a veteran for their service? Well, it sort of ties into last week's topic on oaths. Every veteran that served this nation took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. It is kind of humbling to receive the thanks for serving my country. But I believe the best way to thank a veteran for serving this great nation is to truly understand that document. To truly understand that everybody that wears or wore the cloth of this nation swore an oath to protect and defend. To truly understand the nation or the idea behind the nation, we all willingly put our lives on the line to protect. To be the citizen that does not take their freedoms for granted. If you truly want to thank a veteran for their service to this nation, be the same type of person that loves their country and is willing to defend it. Maybe not on a battlefield in some far-off country, but at home, in your own city halls, your county commissions, your state legislatures, and yes, even in your nation's capital. Understand what type of government that document, our Constitution, created and worked to keep the protections of our God-given freedoms fully intact. Well, enough on that, and for the recap of the past week. Again, I ask that you please keep my wife and her family in your prayers as they navigate this next season in their lives. With that, let's get on with this week's program as we welcome Tennessee State Senator Janice Bowling on to the Liberty Leadership and Lies podcast. Welcome to a show where we will discuss how the citizens of this republic must continuously fight to maintain our liberty, and those fights are increasingly against our own government. Some of the episodes on liberty will shine a light on exactly how all levels of government are seeking to erode our constitutionally protected rights. We will also discuss the leadership needed to restore our constitutional republic, as well as providing examples of good and bad people in leadership positions in all facets of our society. Additionally, we will discuss the lies the people in positions of power and influence spread every day so they can maintain those same positions. I'm your host, Larry Linton, retired U.S. Navy veteran, small business owner, and candidate for the Tennessee House of Representatives, and this is the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. All right, so welcome to today's program. I have a very honored guest. If you guys remember a couple of weeks ago, I shared her speaking a motion to adjourn Governor Bill Lee's special session on the first day. But I want to welcome a true patriot and an absolute conservative stalwart in the Tennessee Senate and Senator Janice Bowling, welcome to the Liberty Leadership and Lies program. It's good to have you today.
Thank you very much. I'll tell you, you have a lot of alliteration going on, Larry Linton.
That was something that my daughter came up with. So it's my website logo is L5. So Liberty Leadership and Lies. Yep. That's that college degree I paid for.
Thing, and I do thank you for the program and for getting words out, because there's so many conservatives in the state of Tennessee that don't feel that their voice is being heard in a lot of the quote unquote traditional media outlets.
Correct. And I think Brandon Lewis and the startup of the Tennessee Conservative has been a breath of fresh air here in the state of Tennessee. And we need more journalists like him that are absolutely honest when covering both sides of the political spectrum.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've known Brandon for several years and was really pleased when he took that stand to get out there and invest his own money in that conservative voice there, because he, as a businessman, was feeling the pressure from the governor on the different mandates that were coming down regarding the scamdemic. And so kudos to Brandon Lewis, and he is doing a wonderful job, and he did it for all the right reasons.
Right, absolutely. So in the Tennessee Conservative here in a past couple of issues or past couple of weeks, it's been mentioning you're bringing back up the state sovereignty bill in the state Senate when it convenes, the regular session convenes. Can you give the listeners a bit of a background on that?
Right, I'd be glad to. This bill was brought to me by Bud Halsey, Representative Bud Halsey, House Bill 726, and the Senate version is 1092, SB 1092. And this is really a very simple, straightforward bill. We all realize that, especially under this administration, but under any administration, that the power to legislate belongs to legislators. It does not belong to the judicial. It does not belong to the presidential, the administration part of government. So our founding fathers were wise enough to divide us horizontally into those three branches and vertically into the state and to the federal government. And so the state government, as Bud Halsey says, has the biggest garden to hoe in. The federal government has very limited powers. And we have seen under this administration and in other administrations as well, but particularly now, where they will go well beyond the authority in an executive order, quote unquote, and rulings from courts. Rulings from courts do not constitute law. It's a ruling, and rulings are overturned. But in the meantime, you can't be forced to act on a ruling. And with regard to the executive orders, those have no legal authority to mandate, for instance, the shots during the scamdemic, which is one of the things he was trying to do, to tell businesses that they had to mandate it. And there's no authority. So our Constitution has always contained in it the power of nullification. And that is to say, sorry, federal government, you have no authority to do that. A case in point right now would be that judge that is telling President Donald Trump that he cannot speak about quite a few things. And you cannot violate the First Amendment right with a ruling or decree or whatever. The constitutionally protected rights, God-given, constitutionally protected, have to be protected. And for her to say he can't speak would be also the same as her saying he couldn't pray, he couldn't assemble. That's a slippery slope. If she can say can't speak, she could say the other things as well. So nullification is a way that your state can say no fault, no foul. We are not obligated to follow that rule or that ruling or that edict from a president or from any of his boards or agencies. They cannot create, and that would include agents, employees, volunteers, contractors. Any of those authorities cannot tell us that we are have to do something or can't do something that we have a constitutional right to do. And when we're looking at the nullification bill, it was called Restoring State Sovereignty Through Nullification. And it was very simply goes back to the existing right to do that and just list several ways, practical ways that already existing right of nullification can be promulgated, can be done, can be taken advantage of. One way you can just ignore it.
Right.
I mean, and this was not an all-inclusive. However, so often people don't know you can do it, that it's been a slippery slope of the federal government and the president in particular getting away with more and more egregious overreaches. So this just puts them back in their garden, as Bud Halsey said. If they want a hoe, they got a hoe in their own garden, and they cannot come over and be telling states and individuals what we can or cannot do. So when all that it did was to create rules, actions, guidelines for the state to declare and nullify a federal action or a mandate or whatever, and rule it void and unenforceable under the authority of the Constitution of Tennessee.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the way the framers designed our Constitution, federal and state. The states gave the federal government very, very limited powers.
Exactly.
And anything not listed in those enumerated powers are reserved to the states. But and when we come back from the next break, we'll talk about what is the biggest impetus for states to follow these unconstitutional laws. And with that, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Okay. All right. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, with Senator Janice Bowling. I like to equate her to the Margaret Thatcher of the Tennessee Senate. She's a true conservative stalwart. And we were talking about the Tennessee's nullification bill that she's the sponsor of in the Senate and Bud Halsey in the House. And so I wanted to talk about, what do you think is the biggest reason why states roll over and show their soft underbelly to the federal government and allow these unconstitutional actions to take place, these edicts or even unconstitutional laws?
A lot of the times it's ignorance, and I'm just going to say ignorance on the part of state legislators, state governments in general. If you think that they have that authority, when in fact you take an oath to uphold the Tennessee Constitution and the federal Constitution, with that oath, it would behoove you to know what it says, each of those constitutions. And so the enumerated powers, as you have said, to the federal government are very limited. When they try, or say, let's say through USDA, unless you follow this rule, we will cut off funding. We will not give you any funds. That seems to be the purse string. However, those funds originated in the states, and those funds cannot be withheld for not following an illegal edict. And so all the state has to do is say, no, that's not constitutional, and you cannot withhold the same amount of money you're giving other states for whatever. We're due equal amounts of money on that, because the Constitution protects that. We have to recognize that that is the law, and they cannot be bullying us. And there are already standing court cases that clearly say that to withhold funds is not acceptable and not legal, not allowable.
It's
So,
like a violation of the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause. They're
mhm,
applying they're applying they're divvying us up and pitting us against
right,
each other using our own money, by the way.
and using our own money. And so if they tell us, we'll not give you this USDA money unless you teach LBGQRSP in your schools.
Yeah, the alphabet mafia curriculum.
So that's bogus. They cannot require us to do something that they have no constitutional authority to require. And they say, oh, but they can withhold that money. That does not give them the power to require it. And they cannot keep it from us. There have been court rulings on that, where they cannot withhold money that is being given to other states, trying to enforce a rule that our state says we're not going to follow. And as you know, executive orders, that sounds formidable, but it's so much opinion. And we have seen this president in particular abuse that, coming, going, sitting down, standing up. He's just
Lying at the beach.
yeah, lying at the beaches, exactly. And that is called the people can give people that they elect mandates.
Right.
That's what an election does. We are tired of liberalism. We're tired of spending too much money. We're tired of growing government. We are going to elect new people who will go in there and uphold the Constitution, uphold the God-given constitutionally protected rights, make certain that the government is only doing those things that the people cannot do for themselves. And when I say the people, that includes the states.
Right.
The state has the authority to do these things. So if they go in there and say, we're going to withhold this money, then you say, well, sorry, Charlie, but you have no constitutional authority to do that. And then we have to stand. And you've got to elect people that are willing to stand on the oath that they take, which is to uphold the Constitution. And to say that all of a sudden they're blackmailing us. Would that be one word to say? They're extorting.
Extortion is the better word to say.
Yeah. And so extortion is not permissible in the Constitution. We are the sovereign state of Tennessee.
Right.
And our values are our values. And the federal government really has very limited authority to do anything that goes into the realms of any state's values. Some states might totally be in agreement with what they're saying and doing in Washington, but that in no way obligates the state to act outside the Constitution of that state or the will of the people of that state. So this is simple legislation. It had no fiscal note, and the allowing a way for the people to bring forth nullification, allowing the way for the General Assembly to bring forth nullification, allowing the way for local governments, singularly or combined with some regional or other governments across the state, but a certain number of those coming together. All of these ways were defined in the legislation in Senate Bill 1092, House Bill 726. And it wasn't exclusive, but because nullification is, I say, more than a right for the states, it's a responsibility. We have to guard the gates of our state. And if the federal government, is trying to come through an unauthorized gate and plunder us by saying, we won't give you any money until you act in accordance with what we say you've got to do. Well, that's absurd.
Absolutely.
That to happen.
Thomas Jefferson stated that nullification is the absolute remedy of the states.
Yes. And Andrew Jackson he didn't believe that the federal government had the right to do the federal bank,
Right. And
which is neither federal nor really a bank. But aside from that nomenclature issue, uh, he refused to ratify the continuation of it,
right.
based on the laws of nullification.
And nullification, I mean, believe it or not, or most people can't believe this, but it's already being used by the states everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
with regard to immigration, right? Sanctuary cities and sanctuary states are nullification of federal immigration laws.
Thank you for saying that. And I'll tell you another way. In Tennessee, before I was elected, I'm pretty sure it happened shortly before I was elected, the General Assembly passed a law that said if the federal government passed any law that was an infringement on the Second Amendment, no money and no elected official in the state of Tennessee would be used to enforce that law.
And look,
that's nullification.
And look where we are, though. I mean, well, the federal government doesn't even have the right to do what they've done with firearms in
That's
particular.
Right.
But look at where we're at with that. People ignore, and I call this out a lot on my program, and we'll get back to that on the other side of the break. But it's the apathy of the electorate that has allowed the federal and the state government the federal government to grow and the state governments to roll over. And with that, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back on the other side. And we're back with Senator Janice Bowling, and we're talking about nullification and how I believe you guys have heard this a lot on this program, that apathy is what has led us to, in this state and our nation, to the state we are in right now. Can you expand upon that a little bit more with what's going on with the Tennessee General Assembly there, Senator?
Well, apathy and or ignorance, and each is deadly when it comes to local governance, state governance, and federal governance. Our founding fathers expected there to be an educated, literate electorate. And we have lost the ability in many ways to read with comprehension, I think. And then I don't think that our Constitution is being taught in any subject area. And our Constitution, whenever anyone says we're in a democracy, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Right. And that's purposeful misdirection, and it's allowed by the government.
That's right. And we are not a democracy. Democracies are a dime a dozen. They rise and they fall by the hour. We are the longest lasting, uniquely formed constitutional republic based on the rule of law, with a representative form of government, not a democratic form of government, a representative form of government. And just as the 2 senators for every state, then also the division of each state into those categories in order to achieve that certain number of representatives. All of that is based on population, but it is not one man, one vote. Correct. In the democratic sense of the word. And there are ways to address the government and ways to address the problems, and elections being one of the most important ways. So when you look at what's going on and how the apathy of the electorate, as you say, allows the states to just roll over, and the federal government to grow rather, and the states to roll over, that is so true. And the federal government will take every inch of ground that we cede them.
Absolutely. It started, I believe, with the passage of the 16th and the 17th Amendments. I think that really started, and we talk about this in a prior episode about federalism and how it's being destroyed. And those 2 amendments to the Constitution, I believe, were the start of the slippery slope to the downfall of true federalism. Right.
And I don't disagree with that. And so when you have that and then couple it with ignorance and apathy, there's the old classic joke of someone going up and saying, I I heard that our constitutional republic is being threatened by ignorance and apathy. Do you hold that to be true to the man on the street? And he said, I don't know, and I don't care.
Absolutely.
Really underscores the point. Each citizen in a constitutional republic based on the rule of law, if they want to complain, they have to make sure that they know what they're complaining about. And it's not difficult. It's not difficult at all to read the Constitution, particularly the Bill of Rights. And if you look at the Tennessee Constitution, it's not onerous to read that. And it's interesting to see the structure and the mindset of these people. And even in the Constitution, right at the very beginning, it says to think that a people would not rise up against an oppressive government is foolish.
Right, yeah.
They have an obligation to rise up against it.
Our state constitution specifically says that if you don't do it, you're dumb.
That's exactly what it says. And so when you look at that and then look at the fact that the nullification should not even be controversial. It's not like we're trying to rebel. As I said earlier, they've even codified a quote unquote preemptively a nullification bill regarding the Second Amendment. Now, can we trust that those elected now would enforce that nullification that is already in Tennessee code that says we will not fund any, as you're saying, sanctuary city? And essentially, we are saying that Tennessee is a sanctuary for our Second Amendment. We're not listening to anything counter to that. We can say the same thing with freedom of speech. We can say the same thing with the right for people to assemble peacefully. It doesn't say to go to the Capitol and riot, right, and scream and try to shut down the lawful government that's going on there. You have no right to do that. And that is why, if you remember what their chant was,
which
you
one?
Remember the chant that was used in April?
With the Tennessee Three?
Yeah. the chant was, this is what a democracy looks like. And right. I was saying, yes, and that's why we don't have one.
Right. A democracy is two wolves and a sheep debating what's for dinner.
Exactly.
A representative republic is two wolves and a well-armed sheep debating what's for dinner.
More than that, even, it's not about the numbers. It's about that sheep has constitutional rights.
Absolutely.
Cannot take them away. And so regardless if there were 10 wolves and one sheep, that sheep has constitutional rights. That's the beauty of it.
Right.
But we then have to make certain that we're not allowing, quote unquote, the loudest mob with the biggest mouth, with the most people who don't have jobs, so they're able to come and hang out at the Capitol for a week at a time.
Right.
And just yell and scream. That's not good government. And but they're telling us that's what a democracy looks like, and probably they're right. That's why we are not one. And so what they're doing does not constitute good government, and our refusing to be run over by out-of-state people screaming, this is what a democracy looks like.
Right.
They're showing their ignorance, as my mama would have said. They have just put their ignorance on display. And then, of course, the media thinks it's wonderful.
Yeah. The media are paid agitators, and that's a whole topic for a whole nother 3 episodes. Well, Senator, I appreciate you coming on the show today, and I definitely want to get back with you once I don't know if you'll have time during the regular session, but hopefully we can get back together and discuss things that are going on in the General Assembly that the actual conservatives here in Tennessee need to be on the lookout for.
That would be great. And I appreciate, again, your program and you and what you're doing, and the fact that the mob trying to take over the Capitol in many ways did light a fire under a lot of conservatives to realize they too need to get involved. So thank you for being so involved.
Well, thank you, Senator. And with that, we'll go to the closing of the show. Well, once again, folks, our time together this week is coming to a close. I truly hope you enjoy the interview with Senator Bowling. She is truly the Iron Lady of the Tennessee Senate who believes in the constitutionally limited government our republic's founding fathers passed down to us. Her work in the General Assembly is one of servant leadership, not just to the constituents of her district, but servant leadership for every Tennessean. We should all pray that more like her would step up and step into the arena in defense of liberty all across the state and the nation. If that were to happen, our republic would be in a much better place than it is right now. This week's wisdom from God's word comes to us from Proverbs 31:30. A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Senator Bowling and her work surely needs to be recognized and praised. She is a woman who fears the Lord and works valiantly to ensure the biblically inspired foundations of our state and our nation are maintained. You can find her email address of the Tennessee General Assembly's page. Be sure and email her or call her with words of encouragement now and throughout the regular session that convenes in January. If it weren't for her and others like her, Tennessee would be traveling down the slippery slope of becoming California much quicker than it is now, thanks to the work of Transpublicans like Governor Bill Lee and the rest of his uniparty cohorts in Nashville. Once again, thank you all for listening, and I pray that you all enjoy the week and that you take a stand in the arena and get involved in the work necessary to restore our constitutional republic. Also, don't forget to give this and any other episode you watch on YouTube, Rumble, or TikTok a thumbs up. Until next week, stand in the arena with me. Reveille, it's time to wake up.